Before you fully settle into this moment, before your thoughts organize themselves, I want you to notice a quiet sensation. A subtle shift you can't quite explain, the way her voice sounds normal yet distant, the way she's present but not really with you. That heaviness in your chest right now isn't fear, it's intuition, it's awareness turning on. Stay here with me for a moment because what you're about to hear is something many men only understand after it's already too late. I'm not speaking to you to accuse you or judge you. I'm speaking to you with care, clarity, and honesty. As someone who has spent years observing how emotional bonds form, strain, and quietly dissolve, what I'm about to share isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to help you see what's often invisible until it's gone. One of the biggest misunderstandings men have about relationships is the belief that women leave suddenly, as if one day they wake up and decide it's over. That's almost never how it happens. A woman usually leaves long before she walks out the door. She leaves in stages, quietly, carefully, internally. While many men are still trying to resolve old arguments or waiting for things to go back to normal, she is already imagining a life that no longer includes the relationship in the same way. When a woman begins this internal exit, she doesn't announce it, she doesn't threaten, she doesn't create drama. In fact, she often becomes calmer. Too calm. Her anger softens, her complaints disappear, her emotional reactions fade. And this is where many men get confused. They interpret this shift as peace, maturity, or improvement. But psychologically, it's often resignation. Emotional detachment doesn't happen randomly. It happens when someone feels unheard for too long, unseen for too long, or emotionally unsafe for too long. The mind, trying to protect the heart, slowly pulls back, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. And here's the part that's hard to notice. She doesn't pull away from love, she pulls away toward relief. Relief from explaining herself. Relief from hoping things will change. Relief from the exhaustion of caring more than she feels is being returned. You might still live together. You might still talk every day. You might even laugh together. But emotionally, something has shifted. It's like she's quietly clearing out a room inside herself that you didn't realize was already empty. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. Because once a woman has mentally replaced the relationship with a sense of inner peace, no apology or sudden effort feels strong enough to compete with that calm. If you're feeling unsettled as you listen to this, that's not a bad sign. That means something in you recognizes the truth. There is a moment most men overlook because it doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't feel like a breakup. It feels small, almost harmless. But this is where the real separation begins. She stops reacting. Think about that for a moment. A woman who once argued, cried, explained herself, repeated the same concerns, or fought for closeness suddenly goes quiet. She no longer pushes. She no longer tries to fix things. She no longer demands emotional connection. And many men mistake this silence for growth or acceptance. But psychologically, silence at this stage is not peace, it's withdrawal. When a woman realizes her emotional needs are unlikely to be met, her mind adapts. It redirects attachment. She may still smile. She may still be polite. She may still show up physically. But she stops letting you into her inner world. This is often the beginning of emotional replacement. Not with another person yet, but with a version of herself that no longer depends on you for emotional stability. She begins to enjoy her own space more. Her phone feels more private, not necessarily secretive, just personal. Her routines expand. Her confidence grows in ways that don't require your validation. From the outside, it can look like independence or self-growth, and in many ways it is. But underneath, something else is happening. She's learning how to feel okay without the relationship. And once a woman reaches that point, the foundation of the bond is already under strain. Another quiet shift follows. She stops asking for your opinion, not because she doesn't respect you, but because she no longer needs emotional input to feel grounded. Emotional bonds weaken when dependency fades. Women tend to emotionally detach long before they physically leave. Here's something that's rarely explained clearly. Women don't replace men with men at first. They replace men with emotional experiences. A feeling of being understood, a feeling of being safe to express themselves, a feeling of being seen without having to explain. That experience might come from a friend, a coworker, a conversation, or even an imagined future where life feels lighter. Once her mind attaches to that feeling, you stop being the primary source of comfort. You might notice her laughter sounds different. Her eyes no longer search your face the same way. Intimacy starts to feel routine instead of connected. This isn't cruelty, it's coping. She didn't start pulling away because she stopped loving you. She started pulling away because she felt alone while still with you. Distance like this isn't created overnight. It builds quietly, moment by moment, until one day you realize you were the last person to notice. And this is where it becomes especially confusing because on the surface, things may actually seem easier. Fewer arguments, less tension, fewer complaints. She stops correcting you, stops reminding you, stops asking for effort. Many men relax at this stage, thinking the relationship has stabilized. But psychologically, this is often the calm after emotional surrender. When a woman stops trying to change you, it's not always acceptance. Sometimes it's disengagement. Her mind has decided that pushing hurts more than letting go. So she redirects her emotional energy elsewhere. She may laugh more at her phone, not necessarily flirting, just mentally stimulated. She lights up around ideas, people, or environments that make her feel alive again. And that light no longer points toward the relationship. Internally, she begins rehearsing life without you, imagining mornings alone, weekends without emotional tension, peace without having to explain herself. The more peaceful that image feels, the less she needs the relationship to survive emotionally. This is an important truth. A woman replaces a man first in her nervous system. At one point, your presence calmed her. Now it feels neutral or even draining, so her body looks for calm elsewhere, safety elsewhere, ease elsewhere. That's why she may suddenly prioritize her routines, her health, her sleep, her goals. This isn't selfishness, it's self-protection. And when someone enters self-protection mode, love becomes optional. You might try to respond by doing more, being nicer, buying gifts, saying the right things, making promises. She notices the effort, but she doesn't feel it the same way anymore. Emotional timing matters. Effort that arrives after detachment has started often feels hollow, even when it's sincere. She may still care about you, but she no longer relies on you. And caring alone isn't enough to sustain emotional intimacy. Feeling emotionally safe is what keeps attraction alive. When safety is replaced with distance, connection slowly fades. If you sense that she feels polite instead of passionate, calm instead of connected, gentle instead of engaged, that's not necessarily growth. It's often emotional checkout. And this stage matters because it's often the last moment where awareness can change how you move forward, even if it can't change the past. As this quiet distance settles in, something else begins to change that's easy to overlook if you're not paying close attention. She starts protecting her emotional space from you, not with coldness, not with hostility, but with a kind of calm restraint that feels polite, measured, almost respectful. She chooses her words carefully. She shares less of what's happening inside her. From the outside, it can look like maturity. From the inside, it's self-containment. From a psychological point of view, vulnerability is emotional currency. When a woman feels emotionally connected, she spends that currency freely. She shares her fears, her doubts, her frustrations, her hopes. When she stops sharing, it's not because she has nothing to say, it's because she no longer believes the emotional return is there. She has learned, often through repeated disappointment, that opening up leads to feeling unseen or misunderstood, so she adapts. She stops telling you when something hurts her, not because it doesn't hurt, but because she already knows how the conversation will end. She stops explaining herself because explaining starts to feel like bleeding without a bandage. Instead of expressing pain, she manages it quietly. She becomes emotionally efficient. And while efficiency can be useful in life, it slowly suffocates intimacy in relationships. You may notice she no longer comes to you first after a difficult day. She doesn't lean on you the way she once did. Sometimes she doesn't seek comfort at all. Either her emotional needs are being met somewhere else, or she's teaching herself not to need them. This is where emotional replacement accelerates. Not necessarily because another man has appeared, but because your role as emotional grounding has faded without either of you fully realizing it. Here's something many women never say out loud. When a woman stops sharing her pain with you, she's already grieving the relationship. Grief doesn't always look like tears or breakdowns. Sometimes it looks like discipline, control, quiet acceptance, a decision to stop hoping for something different. While you're wondering why she's changed, she may be wondering why it took so long to notice. Attraction often fades fastest at this stage, not because you lost value, not because you did something dramatic, but because emotional attunement disappeared. For many women, attraction is deeply tied to feeling emotionally felt. When she feels invisible emotionally, desire doesn't explode into anger. It dims slowly, like a light left on in an empty room. You might sense a physical shift too. Less touch, less warmth, less presence during intimacy, not rejection, just absence. And this is a hard truth to sit with. By the time a woman stops needing reassurance from you, she has already reassured herself that she'll be okay without you. That belief is dangerous for a relationship because love can survive conflict and mistakes, but it rarely survives emotional neglect. If conversations feel shallow where they used to feel deep, if you sense she's emotionally ahead of you, that's not imagination. That's the sound of a bond loosening. And when a bond loosens enough, she won't leave in anger. She'll leave in clarity. Clarity is the hardest thing to argue with. This is the phase where reality quietly shifts again. She stops checking in on you, not just your day, but your mood, your stress, your emotional state. When a woman loves deeply, she monitors emotional temperature. She notices tone changes, energy shifts, silence. When that monitoring stops, it means her emotional focus has moved away from the relationship. You'll notice she becomes more decisive, less flexible, plans get made without discussion. She informs rather than asks, not to be rude, but because compromise no longer feels emotionally necessary. And this is often when men say she's becoming selfish. In reality, she's becoming self-directed. Women don't usually stay in relationships that no longer nourish their emotional core. You may also feel something subtle but unsettling, a sense that your presence interrupts her peace instead of adding to it. Conversations feel shorter, responses feel efficient. You're not rejected, but you're not prioritized either. That's emotional replacement in motion. Because one of the most important roles a partner plays is emotional grounding. When she finds that grounding within herself or outside the relationship, you stop being essential. There's a truth that's uncomfortable but important. A woman rarely leaves the man she feels deeply bonded to. She leaves the man she has emotionally outgrown. Emotional growth often happens silently, especially after long periods of disappointment. She may still support you, encourage you, and be kind. But kindness without emotional attachment isn't love, it's closure in progress. At this stage, many men feel the shift and try to regain control. They ask more questions, they seek reassurance, they become hyper-aware of who she's talking to. They want proof that the bond still exists. But by now, reassurance feels irrelevant to her. She has already answered the hardest question internally: can I be okay without him? And once that answer becomes yes, the balance of emotional power changes. You might feel anxious now while she appears calm. That role reversal is painful. Emotional power shifts when one person stops needing the other to feel whole. This stage is especially confusing because nothing looks obviously wrong. No big fights, no betrayal, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet thinning of the bond. And bonds rarely break loudly. They weaken silently until one day you realize you're holding on to something that has already let go. For many men, this is where the inner decision on her side is already made, even if her outer life hasn't caught up yet. She becomes emotionally neutral around you. Not cold, not angry, neutral, and neutrality is far more dangerous than anger. Anger still carries energy. Neutrality means the emotional cord has been cut. She doesn't argue because there's nothing left to fight for. She doesn't try to be understood because she no longer needs you to understand her. Your reactions don't move her the way they once did. From a psychological perspective, this is emotional completion. She has already processed the loss while still inside the relationship. This is often when men feel like they're talking to a stranger. Same face, same voice, but the warmth is gone. The depth is gone. She may still say she cares. She may say she's confused. She may remain physically present, but emotionally she has already stepped into the future. This is also when another person can appear, not immediately as a replacement, but as a contrast. Someone without history, someone who listens without baggage, someone who represents a version of life she has already imagined. This usually isn't planned. The nervous system naturally moves toward what feels lighter, safer, and more alive. If your words don't land anymore, if serious conversations feel oddly calm, it's because she's already detached from the outcome. You're seeking clarity. She's already at peace. Many men wake up emotionally at this stage. They open up, they promise change, they show effort, and she may believe every word, but she doesn't feel it. Emotional timing matters more than emotional intensity. What might have saved the bond months ago now feels like noise. She may even feel guilty watching you try, guilty that her heart won't respond the way it used to. That guilt often pushes her to leave completely because staying would mean pretending, and she's done pretending. If you're still here, it means something inside you is already awake. Because this final stage is where clarity replaces confusion. And as painful as that can be, it's also where real growth begins. At this point, you may feel like there's nothing obvious you can point to and say, this is where it all went wrong. Like there's no single argument, no clear betrayal, no dramatic collapse, just a quiet emotional neutrality that feels heavier than anger ever did. From a psychological perspective, neutrality signals that attachment has dissolved. The emotional cord that once pulled you toward each other has already been cut. She doesn't argue anymore because there's no longer anything to defend. She doesn't seek reassurance or offer it. She isn't trying to be understood because she has already made peace with being misunderstood. Her inner process is complete. What you're witnessing now is the afterimage of a decision that was made long before it was spoken. This is why her presence can feel confusing. She may still say she cares. She may still show kindness. She may even stay physically close for a while. But emotionally, she's already stepped forward into a version of life where the relationship is no longer central. When you speak, it can feel like your words hit a soft wall and fall to the floor. Not because you're wrong, but because she's no longer emotionally invested in the outcome. This is often when men try one last time to fix things. They finally open up, they promise change, they show urgency, they become emotionally expressive in ways they weren't before. And here's the painful truth. She may understand you now more than ever. She may even believe you. But emotional timing matters more than emotional effort. When connection has already been replaced by inner peace, even sincere change feels late. At this stage, another person can enter her life not as the cause, but as a contrast. Someone without shared wounds, someone who listens without history, someone who reflects back the version of herself she's been becoming quietly. This doesn't mean you were replaceable as a person. It means the emotional role you once filled is no longer vacant. This is where many men internalize the wrong message. They tell themselves they weren't enough, that they failed, that they were unworthy of love. But a woman replacing you emotionally is not proof of your worth. It's proof that something in the connection went unattended for too long. Relationships don't usually end because someone is imperfect. They end because emotional needs were consistently unmet. And here is the part that is rarely said clearly to men. Chasing her now won't bring her back. Explaining yourself won't reopen her heart. Promising change won't override the calm she's already found. Pressure, desperation, or control only confirm her inner decision. You cannot negotiate desire and you cannot argue with emotional detachment. But this is also where something important shifts back into your hands. The moment you stop trying to hold on to her and start trying to understand yourself, you reclaim your power. Not power over her, but power over your future. This moment invites honesty, not the kind you perform for someone else, but the kind you sit with alone. Were you emotionally available when it mattered? Did you listen to understand or only to respond? Did you create emotional safety or did you unintentionally create distance? These questions are not about blame. They are about awareness. And awareness changes patterns. Even if she never returns, this awareness ensures you don't repeat the same emotional absence in the future. Women are drawn to men who are emotionally awake. Men who can sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. Men who don't collapse when connection feels threatened. Men who don't need to control in order to feel secure. Here's the paradox. When you stop chasing validation, you become validating. When you stop begging for closeness, you become safe. When you stop fearing loss, you become grounded. And grounded presence is felt immediately, not just by one woman, but by everyone you interact with. If she is already replacing you internally, let this be the moment you replace the old version of yourself. The version that ignored emotional signals, the version that delayed growth, the version that believed love survives on intention alone. Love survives on attention. Some women enter your life to stay. Others enter to wake you up. Both have value. If this experience hurts, it's because it mattered. And pain that teaches is not wasted. You are not behind, you are not broken. You are not too late to change the man you bring into your next connection, or even into this moment of your life. Men who wake up emotionally don't lose, they evolve. And whether this relationship survives or not, the version of you who understands this truth will never be blindsided the same way again. That is the difference between men who repeat pain and men who outgrow it. A man who understands emotional dynamics doesn't chase loyalty. He inspires it. And the man who inspires it does so not by force, but by presence, awareness, and emotional integrity. Thank you for staying with this until the end.